Well, I'm liking this seat up here, man. I could preach for hours like this. Aren't y'all glad we bought this seat? Well, if you're sitting and I'm sitting, we're all comfortable. We should bring a packed lunch, man, and we can stay all day. Thank you guys for being here, and just thank you for your support of the Sibley family this week through everything they've been through, and for coming last night and honoring Nyan's request for a God Chaser Life Memorial Service. And I told Charlie, Athena last night, that owns Memorial Funeral Home, I told him he was more than welcome to bring a camera crew and to film during a Cornerstone Family Church funeral, and to use for a funeral, actually, for their commercials. And they could advertise themselves, Memorial Funeral Home. We put the fun back in funeral, and they can show footage of Cornerstone. And I was picking at Charlie last night, and because he's always telling me stories about the things that they get into with funerals, especially here in the Appalachian Mountains. You wouldn't believe some of it. And I told him last night, I said, well, maybe after tonight you really can say you've seen it all. And he looked at me and said, you keep forgetting, I was at your dad's funeral, which was over there, and if you were in there on that. But I think we got a little louder, a little rowdier last night, and it was fun. We had church last night, and it was good. Thank you guys for your support. Just keep the family in your prayers, and we're going to be still needing some help as Uncle Stacy transitions to move up here into Tracy. Sorry, my brain this morning. And he's going to take over daddy duties. And it's going to be good because we're going to help, all right? And we're going to be a huge support system to that family. And it's going to be good. All right, shall we continue a little bit with some faith book this morning? All right, give me Hebrews 11:1. Let's get our bearings here a little bit. Now, faith is being sure, confident, know for a fact what we hope for, and certain of what we do not see. Now, we read this stuff and we go, well, isn't that nice? But I want you to see this. It means being sure, being certain of what we do not see. Now, how many of you guys would say that 99% of your stress is because of things that you don't see, and you need to see it? Money stuff, relationship stuff I don't know where the answer is coming from. I don't know how this is supposed to work. I don't know what the solution here is. I can't see it. How many times do we say that? Faith is a hope based on the hearing of God's word that begins to inspire us, and we begin to believe with a great confidence that we're going to see things we haven't seen yet. It's faith. And the next verse says this is what the ancients were commended for. The fact that they did not operate just by what they saw. They didn't walk by sight. They walked by faith. And we talked last week how that faith was our bridge into the supernatural realm. The supernatural, that supersedes what we see. The unseen realm. Faith is the bridge. In Hebrews 11, God is kind enough to build a bridge for us from the seen realm to the unseen realm. And He gives us a series of stories that we're going to show you are stacked in a specific order to show you can take the morsel of faith that's in you, and you can begin to train it, and you can begin to equip yourself, and you can evolve your faith into something great. And last week we talked about the very first step, which was Abel faith. And all Abel had to do was what we all have the power to do today. Trust God. It was a God-trusting faith. And it was demonstrated through his ability to bring God the first fruits. Cain brought God the leftovers of his harvest. He took care of himself first. And he brought God the leftovers. Abel was just the opposite. He brought God the first fruits and the choice of his surplus. And then he trusted God to take care of him. And so God looked upon Abel's sacrifice very favorably, not so much with Cain. And he told Cain, don't you know, you're so depressed, you're so sad, you're so downcast. He said, don't you know if you'll just do what's right, your life will be fine? Well, how was he to make his life fine? Simply by putting God first and trusting God with his life. Being like his brother, saying, God, I'm going to give you the best that I have of my life because I know you're going to take care of me. I know that no weapon formed against me shall prosper. I know you're going to bless me. I know you're going to take care of me. Even those that curse me, I don't have to worry about it. Those that oppose me, you're going to bless me. In fact, the world will be blessed through me. And even the things that the enemy means for my destruction, you're going to turn for good. In fact, all things are going to be turned for good in my life because I love you. And he operated in that confidence daily as a walk. He trusted God with his life. And though our sermon was not on tithing per se last week, it was a good reminder that that's why tithing is still important today. Bringing God the first fruits and the choice. Because it's our way to kickstart our faith, saying, I believe you will trust me, because if I don't believe that God can take care of me, I can't take my faith any further. There's adventures and great miracles lying in all of our futures. But we've got to get across the bridge into that realm. The first step was able faith, trusting God with your life. I want to show you step 2 today for just a few minutes. We're going to bypass Enoch because all we know about Enoch is he walked with God and he was not. And we don't have a lot of details other than the fact that we know that if you live a God-pleasing life for without faith, it's impossible to please God. And if you have the faith that pleases God, God is so impressed with you and so fond of you that it seems like he just wants to take you out of this realm and get you into his realm because he just got to get a little bit closer to you. That's how I want God to see me. I want God to say, man, I can't even stand this separation between you and I anymore, the seen, the unseen. Come on, be with me. Get back with me in this paradise where we can walk together. And Enoch somehow touched God's heart that way. Noah, we know a lot about. And this is what we see in verse 7 of Hebrews 11 about this man called Noah. It says, by faith Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear or holy reverence, built an ark to save his family. By his faith, he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. Now, all these guys and one gal mentioned in Hebrews 11, to really understand their story, you can't just pull the one-liners out of Hebrews 11. You got to go back and you got to read their story and fill in all the gaps. And Noah, it's probably a little easier than most of these guys because we kind of know the big points of his story. We don't know a lot of little details, and so we guesstimate a lot of things with years that it took to build arks and stuff like this. But we see clearly what's going on. And here's the story of Noah. When Noah is 500 years old, God comes to him and says, I've got a plan for your life that you haven't seen yet. And God's trying to send not just a message to Noah, but to everyone after Noah, saying, I want you to understand, whoever you are, wherever you're at today, whatever your history has been, I have not finished your story. I have written things when you were in your mother's womb, days for your life, and you still have not stepped into those days. And it's not too late. And right away we begin to see that Noah, after living many years, when maybe he's ready just to retire and sit around and watch TV, his faith is in a place where he's open to God doing some unseen things, doing some things with his life that he's never seen God do before. How many of you guys would say, I want God to do things in my life that I've never seen him do before? Can I see your hand if that's you? That's important. That we would say, I'm not content with status quo. I don't want this to be the story of my life. I want to do things that nobody's ever seen me do yet. And if we're not operating in that mindset, we're not operating in a Christ mindset. Because Jesus said, I want you to do even more than I did. He doesn't want us just to go around telling the stories about what he did. He said, I want you to do even more. See, we're all about telling the story of Jesus, and Jesus is all about telling the story of us. Noah's 500 years old, and God comes to him and says, I want to do some things you've never seen before. And Noah opens his heart to it, and he says, okay. At 500 years old, Noah starts his family. 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Jephthah. He begins his family at 500 years old. How many of you guys would say that took faith? It's pre-Viagra days. I don't know if they munched on yucca roots or what they did back then to get their vibe going at 500 years old to make babies. But I suspect his wife probably wasn't much younger than him, and it was probably just as much a miracle for her to be part of this little storyline. 500 years old, God says, I want to do something that you ain't going to believe it till you see it. And I suspect it was pretty unbelievable till they saw it. God comes to him and says, let me tell you some more things you've never seen. I'm going to send a flood into the earth. You've never seen a flood before. It's going to happen because there's going to be lots of water, not just coming from the springs of the earth like you're used to. It's going to fall out of the sky, Noah. Can you imagine Noah? But don't worry, Noah, because you're going to build an ark, a really big boat. And once again, Noah says, we have nothing in the Bible to lead us to believe that this man was a carpenter or boat builder. Why would he be a boat builder? They're living in the middle of the desert. God says, here's a long list of things you've never seen that I want you to see. Things I want you to be a part of. Things you've never done that I want you to do. And so Noah begins to put his hand to the instruction of God. And he digs down and he finds the faith, and he begins to day after day develop his faith. Now it's important for you to understand that when God handpicks people like Noah, he sees something there to start with, but everything that needed to be there to finish the work probably wasn't there, just like with you and I. It was a development of faith. It was a walk of faith. It was a maturing of his faith. And we don't really have any clue how long it actually took to build the ark. Some people say up to 120 years because they take all these numbers around that story of the Bible and they try to jive them. That's probably not even remotely accurate. 20 to 40 years is probably more accurate. And that's still a long time to put your hand to something and not see the result yet. To be building something for something that hasn't happened yet. To keep your hand to something by faith because you believe God told you this, but it's been 20 years, it's been 30 years, it's been 40 years now, and you still haven't seen it. And we would say, my faith is just holding on. It just keeps holding on. It just keeps holding on. But that's not the story. The story is your faith is being developed. And you are developing what the Run for God people are learning about as we speak. Endurance. For 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, Noah is building this giant boat in the middle of the desert for a flood. Nobody knows what a flood is. And he has become, at this point, probably the village idiot. And everybody is mocking him and making fun of him. Nobody is taking this man serious because he has activated his faith based on what God has told him. Tim, Kim, maybe not to your face, but how many people have looked at you guys through the years and said, man, that's a sharp couple. Because when we first met you all, my wife and I both were impressed with you all. We said, man, that's a sharp couple. Because a lot of people go into ministry because they feel like they can't do anything else. Not mentioning any names here. Said, man, that couple's sharp. And our first thought was, and we talked about it, we said, you know what? That's a sharp couple. They could really do anything they want to do with life. They're educated, they've got common sense, they've got drive, they're motivated, they could do anything they want. I wonder how many people has looked at them and said, what are they doing? They're in these little dusty places that most of us have never heard. I never heard of the Uyghurs till you guys started talking about it. Never knew anything about the Uyghurs. I didn't know there was a Muslim area of China. Uzbekistan? Huh? How many people said, what are you guys doing? They didn't see what you saw because they didn't hear what you heard. Through the years, it's not just You holding on, hoping you're going to see something, hoping someday that's finally, there's going to be a big explosion you're going to see. No, it has been an intentional time where God has trained your faith. And I suspect you guys can stand through some stuff right now that maybe 10 years ago wouldn't have been so easy to stand through. That's what faith training does. Yesterday, you guys, ran for 3 minutes and walked for 30? Something like that. I'm probably exaggerating. Ran for 3, walked for 3. Okay. That's going to change, isn't it? You're building your endurance. I can run 3 minutes. Now I can run 6 minutes. Now I can run 10 minutes. Now I can run 20 minutes. Next thing you know, I'm going to run a half marathon. Okay, 5K, then half marathon, then full-blown marathon. It's training yourself for endurance, to run. That's why Paul compares faith to running a race. Getting on a course and staying on the course, because if you'll stay the course, you're developing your faith and you're developing an endurance for your faith. Noah teaches us about faith endurance. For God to speak something to our heart, we put our hands to it and we get some stickicity and we man up and we stay the course. And when we hit a little opposition, a little conflict, something kicking back, a little enemy here or there, a disappointing day here and there, we don't throw the towel in. We just say, I'm getting through this day and I'm going to start again tomorrow. And some of you that have been in this race for a long time, you've probably noticed that the things that flew up in your face 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago that almost crashed your party, you don't even really notice those things anymore. They told me when I went into ministry to get ready for my faith to be tested and built, because they said new levels, new devils. I learned what they were talking about. The devils from 10 years ago, I don't notice them anymore. It's got to be a new devil. Something I've never seen. Something more extreme. But if we can stay the course. Noah stayed the course. And the story just kept unfolding. God saying, okay, stay in this thing, stay in this thing, stay in this thing, stay in this thing, stay in this thing. As a pastor, I am constantly and consistently troubled, not because of a lack of people starting change in their life, but people staying the course. It breaks my heart. I see no shortage of people getting back on the chalk and starting their race, and God beginning to do incredible things in their life. But oh, how I see that we are in such conflict to stay the course because of temporal oppositions. Noah stayed the course, and now he's probably maybe up to 40 years and the ark is done. And God says, I need you to call for the animals. And don't understand how this happened, a very supernatural thing that I'm sure nobody had ever seen before. And the drawbridge is dropped onto that boat, and the animals begin to show up. 7 pair of every clean animal. Trying to remember the numbers now. A pair of the unclean. And the numbers, when it added up, were incredible of even the animals in that known region. And if it was a worldwide flood, which we don't know for sure, we know it was worldwide in the known world for sure. Probably didn't need to happen where there wasn't people because there was no evil. But we don't know. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change the story. The bottom line is that God cleansed the earth with a flood. And there were a whole lot of animals that had to come. And I don't know how many days it took for those animals to come and show up and load up on that ark. But I know nobody had ever seen anything like that. People coming from all over to see this incredible sight. At that point, they have to be wondering, maybe he's not the village idiot. You know, and maybe he was the original Dr. Dolittle. I don't know. But these animals are some way responding to this man. And it probably took many days. And then it began to rain, and God closed up the door on that boat. And for 40 days and 40 nights, it rained. It rained. It rained. And the waters rose, and it flooded. And the earth was cleansed of unrighteousness. And Noah didn't just save his family, he saved humanity. He didn't start out a hero. He didn't start out with visions of grandeur. I don't even know if he understood he was saving humanity. After the 40 days are over, the story's not over. Because for another 150 days, they're floating. And when I think about the magnitude of what is involved here, just with the logistics of this event is incredible with these animals and the food supply and the cleaning of stalls. The 4Es know all about, you've got to clean horse stalls every single day. Imagine elephant stalls. Now, I don't know if an elephant was a clean or an unclean animal, but if he was considered clean, there's 14 of those suckers on the boat. And that's a lot of poop. How many of you guys have ever seen an elephant pile? I grew up with cow piles, or cow pies is what we call them. The elephant pie. The logistics, the faith that it took. And from the day that God came to Noah and began to speak to his heart, to the day that they landed on dry land and opened the doors of that ark to start life new. It was incredible the things that that man saw that he never saw before in his life, through his life. The things he saw God do, incredible, unspeakable, unimaginable things. For one reason, he stayed the course. He did what Jesus said we would have to do. Put our hand to the plow and not look back. Look at this in Luke 9:62. Powerful, powerful verse. Jesus replied, no one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for service in the kingdom of God. And what has happened here is everyone is being amazed by the things that Jesus is doing. And everybody's wanting to follow him. Everyone's wanting a piece of the pie. But they're all saying, but first I need to do this. And but first, they were like Cain. But first, let me take care of me. And Jesus is looking for Abel, that first step of faith, where they say, I will first give you me and the best of me, and I will trust you then to take care of me. And that's what Jesus is talking about when he says, no one who puts their hand to the plow and looks back is fit for service in my kingdom. He's talking about the service of faith, the great faith exploits. He had learned, Noah, to put his hand to the plow. Not be deterred and distracted by people making fun of him. The fact that now it's been 1 year and then 2 years and then 3 years. We live in such a microwave culture. And on top of that, we have come up through, many of us, through charismatic ranks where we have microwaved the very works of God. And everything has been reduced down to altar calls. And we preach great sermons about faith and all kinds of wonderful wonders of the kingdom of God. And then we give altar calls and we say, who wants this? And they flood the altars and we lay hands or we blow on them or we do something. And we tell people, you've got it. And there's not anything in Scripture to back it. There were instant miracles all through the Bible, but they were all temporal. The spiritual works took time to develop that intestinal fortitude of faith. The faith that Paul was talking about in the church of Ephesus when he talks about putting on the full armor of God. And he says, when you've done all this and you've prayed, when you've done all you know to do, what was his instruction then? Just stand. Just stand. I don't know what to do. Do you know how to stand? Yeah, I guess. Then just stand. Well, but doesn't someone need to solve this? Just stand. Just stand. Trust God. Trust that God sees this, that God knows, that God's got a plan. Just stand. Noah had learned over time how to just stand and to stay stable and consistent in the call of God. And not look back like the Moses generation. Oh, we were better off in Egypt. Oh, it's so hard now to serve God. All these miracles are just wearing me out. We're surrounded by the life of God and griping and complaining the whole time. Because we don't see what God is doing. And when we don't see what God's doing, we can't muster the faith to stay the course. Moses, Noah. We always fuse those two guys together, don't we? Noah kept his hand to the plow. He learned to just stand. Look at this in Ephesians 4. Look at these verses. Verse 11 through 14 says, it was He, Jesus, who gave some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, and some to be pastors and teachers. Why, Lord? To prepare God's people for works of service. The same service Jesus was talking about that if you put your hand to the plow and look back, you're not fit for? Why are you preparing us, Lord? I'm not done. Reverse. Cursor arrow up. To prepare God's people for works of service. Why, Lord? So that the body of Christ may be built up. Built up, what are you talking about? Any chance they're talking about building up our faith, okay? Until we all reach unity in the faith. Not in what translation of the Bible we use, not in how we dress for church, not in the kind of music we like, not in what colors we like to paint the walls, not how we have churches and funerals and stuff like that. No, unity of faith, where our faith is into a place of maturity. Unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God, and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. What'll happen, Lord? Well, then you will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves, and blown here and there by every wind of teaching, and by the cunning and craftiness of men and their deceitful scheming. Paul is saying, if you want to be stable in life, consistent, and not all over the board, you've got to get yourself in a situation and let your faith mature and grow. Then you won't be tossed and turned. Noah did that. And it was a very God-pleasing faith. God-pleasing faith, like with Noah, is an exciting life. It's filled with intrigue, adventure, maybe romance. It's filled with the unthinkable, things that have never been seen before, things that have never been done before, things you never thought you would be a part of. God-pleasing faith, that place that God is trying to draw us to, is a place filled with excitement and adventure. And God's trying to take us there. It's also filled with unpredictability, surprises, risk, confrontation. But those are the things God uses to teach us endurance for our faith, to just keep standing. It's those little bumps in the road. It's those, even sometimes what we would call mountains. And we're so quick to want to speak to every mountain and cast it into the sea. And there are absolutely many mountains that we don't need to be speaking to, we need to be climbing over. There's valleys of the shadow of death that we don't need to be praying, God, take us out of here, but take us through. Take me through this valley. We were talking about Brother Yoon last week from the Heavenly Man, and how that when they put him in that 4-foot by 3-foot box in prison so he would stop preaching to all the other prisoners, his one request was, God, somehow get me a Bible. That would not be the American approach. It would be, God, get me out of this box. I want to be listed in God's journals, as we talked about with Nyan last night, as one of the great ones. Malachi says that God watches man. He listens to what they're saying and he watches what they're doing. And when something grabs him, he records it in his book of remembrance. I want to be in that book. And that's not pride saying that. In fact, it's a slap in the face of the one whose image I am made in to not desire that. Noah learned how to stay the course. He learned daily to let his faith develop where he could cope with life and stabilize and be consistent. And I look at this generation of our culture, and I am so concerned because in my lifetime, I have watched coping skills go downhill, downhill, downhill. It is incredible the things we can't cope with anymore. And we've come from a generation that went through a Great Depression and terrible world wars. And men that saw unspeakable things in combat and came home, and despite the bad dreams, the things that kept popping back up in their mind, they, for the most part, pushed through, came back home, became husbands again, became fathers, became the hardest workers America has ever seen. And somehow there was something going on in the soulish realm where they learned to cope in ways that we just don't know how to cope anymore. We praise all of our young men and women who go off and serve this country and protect us. But I am alarmed by the percentage that are coming home with PTSD that never even saw true combat. And that's a situation that has nothing to do with the military and serving for our country. That's a story of America's lack of coping skills long before these young men and young women ever went over. It was being reflected long before that when they probably couldn't cope because the girlfriend just broke up with them, so the only response is to stick a gun in my mouth because I can't cope with rejection. We're going to be in trouble if we don't get intentional developing the faith of our children and teach them how to cope. Teach them how to cope when someone makes fun of them, when someone calls them names. I applaud everything that's going on with the anti-bullying stuff in school, but that's just part of the story. You better teach your kids how to accept some of that stuff and cope with it. We're not all pretty. We don't all have perfect bodies. I stand before you ashamed that I would even try to use myself as an example of perfection today. But there was an era when Twiggy was in, and in that era, I'd have been hot. I know what it's like to grow up. Yeah, I wear these black plastic glasses now, and they're cool. How many of you guys remember when the black plastic glasses first came out? And it was not cool. But it was the only option if you had to wear glasses. Hey, Four Eyes. Hey, Coke Bottoms, what's up? On top of that, I'm one of the shortest kids in class, if you can imagine, till my junior year of high school. And I didn't have the guns then that I got now. Everyone knew I liked jelly bread. I don't know how the word got out. I love jelly bread. So everyone said, "There's old Jelly Arms. Hey, Jelly Arms." But you know what? I was never even remotely popular until I got with you guys. Nobody really liked me that much. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for the endorsement there. Hey now, you the man. My parents, though, grew me up in an atmosphere of faith where my confidence was not found in men, but in God's perspective of me. I was picked on all the time, called names. It didn't take away my destiny, my purpose in life. It didn't crush me. I never thought about hanging myself. I never thought about going and crouching in a corner and pulling the shades and saying, "Everyone just leave me alone. I'm going to stay in this fetal position until Jesus comes back." No. Why don't we have coping skills anymore? Because we don't have faith anymore. We're not trusting that God is looking out for us, that God's going to take care of us. We're not staying in the saddle and seeing where the horse is going to take us. As soon as the horse starts bucking or something, man, I remember we grew up with horses and ponies on the farm, and I had this old painted pony, man. He was beautiful, and I loved saddling that thing up and riding him. I'll never forget the day I got on that thing and did not understand till afterwards, because my dad was standing there, and he filled in the gaps for me. And all of a sudden, that pony took off bucking, and when I mean buck, how many of you guys ever seen when the horse just jumps up there and all 4 feet just kind of come together? He's bucking so high. Andre probably knows exactly what I'm talking about. And we didn't have a board back then to, I got to stop that. And man, I held on as long as I could, and finally that thing threw me up in there, and I landed face first on the ground, came up with a mouthful of sod. And my dad said, yeah, didn't you see that bee chasing you guys? Well, a bee had landed on his butt and stung him, and the whole thing took off. But our horses aren't even bucking that hard. They just start galloping a little bit, and we get, whoa, boy, whoa, I'm getting off this thing. We got to stay on the horse. See where it's going to take us, into a place of intrigue and adventure and excitement. We need to get the faith some endurance and stabilize. Get some consistency. Start putting our hand to some things and keep the hand there till we know God has said, pull it off. And God never, one of the things I never want to hear you say around me, because I've heard it my whole life, that people will be walking out their walk with God and something will get a little tough. And someone will go, well, that's probably just a sign from God that you're not supposed to be doing that. Really? Have you read this? I got hundreds of stories just the opposite here, where God says, hey, I want you to do something really cool for me. Okay, Lord, here am I, send me. And then the crap starts hitting the fan. Everybody in the world wants to, who wants to be a great prophet for me? Oh, I want to be a prophet, Lord. All right, do you understand what they do to prophets? Opposition and conflict and everybody wanting to crucify you. Oh, I want to be just like Jesus. You sure? Like having your beard plucked out? You like being beat in the face and beat in the back and your flesh ripped off and nailed to a cross and get rejected and just because you did something nice for somebody? Really? I wonder how he stood up to that. He must have known who he was, known who his father was, and knew his father was going to take care of him. He stayed the course. He stayed the course. He stayed the course. I was thinking this week, when I was thinking of Noah, of another great sailor that history talks about. His name was Christopher Columbus. How many's ever studied much about Christopher Columbus? Christopher Columbus grew up in a time much different than us, of course, when it comes to church. He was born in Italy, and he grew up in a family of navigators. They were usually just navigating the Mediterranean, not the big waters. But he just really had a heart for that, and he became very curious about what was out there. He also grew up, as many people did, quite churched. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean his faith was very matter of fact, based on what he believed from the Word of God. He believed God was God, and he believed, he really, really, really believed in the Great Commission. He believed that his primary job in life was to go out and win souls. And so he got this idea that he wanted to go out and take a voyage and find some shortcuts. Now, he was never trying to find the area of North America, the Caribbean, or anything, the gateway to North America, anything like that. We all know what happened in 1492, right? He sailed the ocean blue. But just prior to that, he began to get big ideas. And everybody was trying to figure out how to get to India, what they called the Indies, because of trade. There were valuable spices and stuff there. And they couldn't go the normal trade routes on land because of there was a lot of Muslim unrest even back then. And so they couldn't go that way. So Columbus decided there's got to be a way to get there by water, and what we'll do is we would have to walk this way if we go by land. If we go by water, we're going to have to go around the world and go this way. The only trouble was Columbus thought the world was about 5 times smaller than it actually is. And if he'd have known how big it was, he'd have probably never started the journey. But he was looking for motivation and to do this thing and to find the determination. And his inspiration was found in the fact that God told him to go into all the world and make disciples of men. And he understood that the Indies was filled with non-Christians and that someone needed to go there and preach the word and let those people know about the God of his Bible. And so he went from person to person trying to get the financing to build a fleet, raise up the sailors, and take this journey to go around the world into the Indies and open up a trade route. But nobody would buy into it because they thought he was crazy. Now, most of the scholars did not believe that the earth was flat. They didn't believe in that stuff. They'd already discovered that the earth was round, but that was in the educated population. But your ears can't help but feed a little bit off the uneducated population, where the people are always saying, you're an idiot, the world is flat, you're going to fall off the edge of the earth. And there were people saying, well, we know what's at the edge of the earth. If you get to the edge of the earth, you fall off into this great pit of fire, and it's filled with dragons and all kinds of stuff. And he's hearing this stuff, but he's a learned man. He's probably not deterred by that. But he learns that the king and queen, especially the queen of Spain, is really into advancing their nation across the planet. And he goes to them, and after several failed attempts to get their backing, finally there are ambassadors there who go to the queen to convince her to convince the king, this will be good for your country. Even if he fails, it's going to be good. And so they finance him, and in 1492, in August, they start the journey. And when Columbus actually hit Atlantis, where I'm taking my wife for her 30th this summer. That's the Bahamas, actually, by the way. I don't think Atlantis was there yet. When he hits the Bahamas, he's hitting the Caribbean there, and he actually hits several islands, and over 4 voyages over time, he hits a lot of different places there. He honestly, because of the way the people looked, their skin tone and stuff, he thought that he had hit the Indies, and it just coincidentally enough, there were a lot of spices in the Caribbean. When we've been in Jamaica a few times and for missions, and the Jamaica's just full of incredible spices. And he was just sure that he had found a shortcut to the Indies. And when he died, actually Columbus died never knowing that he had discovered the gateway into the New World. He never knew. He died believing that he had just found a shortcut to what we would call India. But actually, God had used him to do exactly what was in his heart to do. To discover a new land that needed to be evangelized. How wonderful is that? But through the years of Christopher Columbus' life, obstacle after obstacle after obstacle, he just found the faith to keep on going, to keep his hand to the plow. And there were people just in lines, in droves, waiting to discourage him and turn him into the village idiot, just like with Noah. But the man stood the course. And he just stood, and he kept his hand to the plow. With opposition and conflict, he kept his eyes fixed like flint on the author and the finisher of his faith, and lo and behold, the man discovers the new world and opens up a market of evangelism that had never been seen before. How powerful is that? Christopher Columbus saw things that he had never seen before because he stayed the course with his faith. He let God develop an endurance for his faith, and he got to see things he never thought he would see. Noah got to become things he had never been because he stayed the course with his faith. He had never been a carpenter. He became a great carpenter. He had never been a zoologist. He became a great zoologist. He'd never been a navigator. He became a great navigator. In fact, things today that still are in place with navies today. Did you know it was Noah that introduced pork to the Navy? Yeah. Told his son Ham, come on, get on board. I shouldn't have destroyed the moment there. I had you on the edge of your seat. Half y'all were ready to get saved. Oh my, I need to put this thing up because I got 3 more jokes that's just going to sidetrack us even more. I want you to hear what I'm saying. God said, I want to do something with your life that you're not going to believe. In fact, as you hear me telling you this, you're going to wonder if it's really me or not. Because I'm going to tell you about things you've never seen before. Remember Isaiah? one of his greatest prophetic speeches to prepare us for an exciting journey. He said, God's getting ready to do new things. Do you not perceive it even before it springs up? Can't you sense it? Can't you see it? Can't you feel it? But because Noah said, yes, Lord, and he put his hand to the plow and he just stood through conflict and opposition, he got to see God do things with his life that was just incredible. He became things he never thought he would become. You know, when I started my walk of faith, you would have never convinced me in a billion years I was going to be a pastor. You would have never convinced me that. I could see other people doing it. You would have never convinced me that I could be a pastor or would be a pastor. Never would have convinced. I couldn't. No. What has God got for you that's hard for you to see, but if you will get in the game, put your hand to this thing, let God develop some endurance to your faith, stay the course, what might you see about your life that you never thought you would see? I want to close this morning by telling you about one of the greatest people I've ever met. And it's weird because Nyan made me think about her. There was something about Nyan's demeanor and this lady's demeanor that was so mutual, and it made me start thinking about this woman this week. I met her the first time I went to the Philippines in 1993, spring of 1993. And went there for 3 weeks to preach in the churches, and a man that was on the Russian crusade team with us when we went into Russia right after communism fell. It was an international team, and there was this little man, brother June Dominador Mendoza, about this tall, from the Philippines. We were Mutt and Jeff. He said, Brother Scott, you must come to the Philippines. So I went to the Philippines, and he took me around to these churches, and we were in this little church one night, and Brother Mendoza got very excited because there was this lady there that, come to find out, he never thought he would see in church. He knew about this woman. Everybody in the area of this region right outside of Manila in Bulacan knew this woman. She was a famous madam. She wasn't a madam of prostitution. She was a madam of strip dancing. And she had these girls that worked for her, and she took them around to these clubs, and they were called stables. And she had stables of dancing girls that went to these clubs, and they stripped. And she was completely responsible for them. She paid them. She took care of them. She housed them. She was a famous madam. And she heard there was going to be an American there that night. And for some reason, the Spirit of God pulled on her heart, just out of intrigue, to come. And Brother Mendoza couldn't believe she was sitting there. She was this nice, round, jovial woman. She stood out in a crowd because everyone in the Philippines was this tall and this big around, and she was the opposite. She was fluffy. And she sat that night and she listened. And when the night came to a close, she gave her heart to Jesus. It was incredible. Brother Mendoza said, this is why you were supposed to come for this woman right here. Because curiosity is the only thing that got her there as far as she knew. It was about 2 to 3 years later, I went back to the Philippines, closer to 3 years probably. Brother Mendoza was once again so excited about this ex-madam. He said, Brother Scott, she is now a pastor. This woman got on the horse, buckled up, started growing like crazy. 3 years later, this woman's pastoring a church. Couldn't believe it. He said, you must go to her church and preach. She said, I must bring you there. Went to her church and preached, and we had such a big time. She had such a laughter about it. It was her sense of humor, just like Nyan's, just this sense of humor, man. It was awesome. Had a great time with her. Went to her house, and she fed us, and it was great. She was the one. She was the one. When I came to her house, she said those amazing words to me. She said, you want I should fix the dog for you? No, I'm not worthy. 'Cause The next time I went to the Philippines, probably about another 3 years later, I went to her church to preach again. She said, Brother Scott, tomorrow night we're going to the clubs. I said, what clubs? She said, the strip clubs, where the girls that used to belong to me still work. I said, okay, so what, are we going to go outside and we're going to hang out? We're going to try to talk to these girls, give them some chick tracks. You know, what are we going to give these chicks some chick tracks? What are we going to do here? And she said, we're going into the clubs and you're going to preach in the clubs. So they're not going to let me go in the clubs and preach. She said, I've already arranged it. Well, I realize that I am very focused and holy and close to God, and the enemy has no stumbling blocks that work for me anymore. I'm just fixed like flint on the face of Jesus. But I'm just thinking in the back of my mind, it might be hard to stay focused on the Word. I asked her about that. I said, are the girls going to be dancing? She said, no, the girls don't dance till 10 o'clock, but the clubs open at 8, and we're going to go there to 3 different clubs between 8 and 10 o'clock, and you're going to preach to the people that are in the clubs waiting on the girls. Well, this woman still had power, and she could do whatever she wanted, evidently. So she takes me to the clubs, and we go in the first club, and there's live bands and stuff, and this band is playing, and they get done, and she's over talking to the owner, and she says, okay, go get the mic and start preaching. And they send an interpreter with me, and I go up there, and it was really cool because you could hear a pin drop in all 3 clubs. You could hear a pin drop. And I preached evangelistically, and I asked for hands for those who decided that they had heard something tonight that persuaded them, I want to follow this Jesus. And hands were going up everywhere in the clubs. And the last club, just as we were leaving, a limousine was pulling up to unload the girls. And it was just so funny as I'm walking by them and they're walking by me, and they're like giving me a look and I'm giving them a look, if you know what I mean. And like, I wish you were here when I was preaching, is what I'm saying. 30 years. 30 years. You have stayed the course for 30 years. What great faith you must have. Here's my point. That woman was lost in her sin. Not just lost in her sin, she was causing many others to fall into pits of life. And in a time period of about 6 years, this woman went from being a madam to being one of the most productive evangelists on that side of Manila. In just 6 years, because she said yes to God, she put her hand to it, she just stood, she stayed the course. And it was incredible as you watched what God did in that person. The things that she saw that she never thought she'd see, the things that people saw in her that they knew they'd never see. And she was just this nobody on the other side of the world in a little nation that we never even think about. Well, back here in America, the place where God really loves people, where we're all so highly favored. Point being, whatever opportunity there is on the other side of the world, how much more is the opportunity in our world, in America? It's the land of opportunity. What is it that we've not become, that we've never seen, that God is saying, but I saw it. I saw it in your mother's womb. I wrote about it. I'm waiting on it to materialize. I'm just waiting on you to stay in the saddle. Stop throwing the towel in every time life gets a little rough. Stop being so reactive to your disappointments and your surprises. Stay the course. Just stand. Let me develop your faith to become something that will blow your mind. And if we can do that, we can become like Noah and like Christopher Columbus, and God will use us to become saviors in the earth. When all we've been doing to this point is crying out for a Savior, Lord, save me from this and save me from that. we will become the saviors of the earth. We will become the ambassadors that Paul talked about. He said, it's though the Lord continues to reconcile the earth through us. Right you are, Paul. That's what I want. How many of you guys want this for your life? Won't you stand with me? It's just about holding on. How many's ever seen that poster? It's just so cliche. It's been around for years. The little kitten, and he's hanging by a limb by one little claw or something. And what does the caption say? Hang in there, baby. Hang in there, baby. I don't know about any of the vulgar ones that are in inconspicuous places, but the main one that's been around for years says, hang in there, baby, because that was a great expression in the 70s or the 80s or something. Hang in there, baby. And that's all God is saying to you. And He would definitely call you baby because you're His baby, you're His child, and He loves you. And He sees you're going through all kinds of stuff in life, and He's saying, just hang in there, baby. Hang in there. Hang on. We've watched these little girls in the Upward basketball program this year. So many little girls came to the program so timid, so shy. Some of them didn't even know if they could get out on the floor. And if you threw the ball at them, they would go like this. And we've watched them in just, 9 short weeks. We've watched these little girls just bloom out on that court. In 9 weeks, we've watched radical changes in those little 9-year-old girls. And it was just a reminder for me. If we can just hang on, stay on the court, stay in the saddle, hang in there, baby. Let our faith develop some endurance. And we will be one step further on the bridge into the unseen realm of God and the plans He has for our life. Father, I thank You for this house today. Lord, they have proven in so many ways their sincerity in their walk with You. They're here today, Lord, not out of religion, not because anyone mandated or forced them. They are all here today of their own free will because You're doing something in their lives. Everyone here, Lord, from the most seasoned to anyone who would come in here today, Lord, even unsure why they're here, and yet something persuaded them, be here. Lord, you are using this day. You are using this message, this word, this sermon, and you're using it as a carrot, and you're dangling it under our nose, and you're saying, come on, follow this carrot. And wherever we're at on our course, in our race, Lord, we are all certain of one thing. We have not come to the end of that race. Our course is not fulfilled. We are all, wherever we're at, and not moving any forward past this till we go the next step of faith. So, Lord, I ask right now, and each one here today, that You would take this word and You would just stir it in our spirit, in our soul. Lord, I pray that everything that's alive in us will just be directed into this word today. That this word will be all that matters in our life in this season. Everything else will take a back seat, and we will get focused on this word today. For those that are here, Lord, that would come in and say, I don't know where I'm at in the race. I'm not sure I've even started the race. I don't know where my life is with God. I lift them up to You right now. And I say to you people that would be in those shoes, by simple faith, just open your heart. And in your heart say, Jesus Christ, come and take my life. Take over my life today. Put me in this race. Put me on this course. I want to believe for You to do something incredible for my life. I stand with them today, Lord. And I declare by the blood of the Lamb, through simple faith, they are made clean today. And in their hearts and their minds, Lord, may they feel the embrace of Your Spirit and a hunger to get back in this place the very next time they can, so they can become a disciple and learn and grow. For the rest of us, Lord, take us where we're at and nudge us on, Lord. Ain't nobody in this place that doesn't have a good excuse to throw the towel in, Lord. But we're all shooting for God-pleasing faith here right now. I pray that You'll do this fresh work in us today. And those of you that would agree with that for your own personal life, you know what to say. Amen. Love you guys. Bless you. Go in peace.